What's the craziest way you've seen someone quit their job? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. I worked at Firehouse Subs for 3 days, and when I met the owner and went to go introduce myself, he said, "I don't talk to new employees until they've stuck around long enough." I just scoffed, laughed out loud, and took my apron off and left. He looked so pissed, but like, "You don't care to know me? Why are you mad?" Next story. I was fresh out of college working at a bank. The head teller hated our new manager and had soured on the company overall. One day, she didn't show up for work. My manager was trying to get a hold of her in his office. Then, one of the drive-through tubes comes in and makes a loud noise, as if there was something heavy in it. Upon opening, we found her keys and badge, and the car already gone from the drive-through. Legendary. Next story. Big box store. We had to work until a certain day to get a bonus. A long-time employee worked that day and quit on his way out. Effective immediately. He was starting a new job on Monday in a completely different town. His whole family had moved there already. Incredibly, nobody found out he sold his house and planned all this. It was a Saturday, and the boss was furious. Next story. I used to work in management for a party-hardy, crap-on-the-wall Mexican restaurant chain. At first it was great, but then they got too big for their britches, overextended, and entered their death spiral. Many of the top-grossing managers left and were replaced with inexperienced people who were then worked like donkeys. Well, one of those donkeys had enough. On a Saturday night, he invited everyone he knew to come in and comped their bills. Then he closed the restaurant early and started the party for the staff. Much food and liquor was consumed. He left the trashed restaurant unlocked, keys on the desk with a crude "I quit" sign. Next story. Worked at a donut shop, basically doing the dough making, but I also did all the other work. We had some problems with the owners as they were narcissists to the extreme, men who believed women were beneath them types, except that all but one of the employees were women here. Well, after a huge argument in the group chat, I warned the general manager, who was on workman's comp at the time, so I was doing most of the managerial work also, that if the owner came in and started any crap, I would be walking out. Here I am making dough for the day, training a new girl, she had been there about a week, and one other employee taking care of the front end, and the owner walks in, looks around, and starts yelling at us about where the glazer was placed. We had to move it because the plug didn't work, and we had moved the filling station to the front because it worked better all being in one area. He wanted the glazer put back, and for the plug cord to stretch across the room. The new girl quietly asked why we could not leave the glazer where it was, as it worked fine there. And he got inches from her face and started screaming that if she didn't like it, she could leave. I dropped what I was doing, grabbed the girl, and said we were leaving. We both clocked out, and I called my manager and let her know what happened. The store ended up losing a total of 12 employees that week, and I was the only one who knew how to make the dough and prepare it for the day, so they went without a baker for a while and has to hire new people to start all over. Even the manager left there and is now suing them for never paying for their workman's comp. Next story. This happened when I worked at State Street Bank. People had been quitting or getting laid off and weren't getting replaced, so our workload became crazy. Managing director comes down for a meeting and says there is mandatory overtime for a while. Lady says she's not willing to do that, as she was promised a work-life balance when she started here. Managing director says, 12 hours here, 12 hours at home. That's a balance. Then says we need to come in that Saturday too. Same lady says she can't miss her kids' soccer games or something. Managing director says he thinks it would be more important that she's employed so her kids can eat. She says, "Actually, I don't need this job, thank you," and gets up and walks out as our direct manager chases after her. Next story. Years ago, a coworker didn't do anything crazy at first. He put in his 2 weeks notice, worked his 2 weeks. The last day, he showed me an acrostic he'd made. Called the worker's mantra. It had 7 lines of positive statements about the work he was doing, and the first letter of every line spelled out, "Damn, place we worked." He printed several, laid a stack in one of the break rooms, and left early. Well, a supervisor found them, didn't catch the hidden message, printed out more of them, and had been taping them up around the office and giving copies to people. Took about 20 minutes before he was scrambling to get them all back to throw them away. I still have one, work from home, so it's on the wall. Next story. There were 2. First one, I was in high school working in a kitchen. We had a new kid who absolutely hated it there. The boss asked him to pick up garbage outside. He grabbed a squeeze bottle of ketchup and wrote, "I quit" on the side of the building. The second one was years later in an office. One of the managers in the IT department had a reputation for being difficult. One of the nicest girls completely lost it and basically shouted that she would rather rub glass in her eyes than work for her another minute. She was a legend. Next story. I was working in a welding shop. The new guy on his second day approached our foreman and asked for $20 for a taxi hone because he shat his pants. He took the money, went home, and we never heard of him again. Next story. When I was in college, I looked for work each summer. Back when minimum wage was like $2.85 or $3.15 an hour. I applied for a job at KFC. Turns out, the area manager, KFC in our state used to be run by the Triangle Corp. The stores made a triangle, 3 triangles made an area, 3 areas made a district, and 3 districts made a region. Started messing with the store manager commission. Our store was the busiest in the region, doing twice as much business as any other. We were near an international airport, and back in the 90s, it was easy to bring food on planes, so everyone would stop at KFC and get food to go, including local sports teams, because, unlike burger and fries, chicken is still pretty good when cold, coleslaw is okay at room temp, and the mashed gravy stay warm for a long time. Anyway, our store would easily break our sales goals every month, leading to a big bonus for the manager each month, and a smaller one for the area manager, district manager, and regional manager. But our area manager decided to get tricky with the bonuses, cutting part of the store manager bonus away. Plus, turnover was high. Average tenure was about 2 weeks before someone quit. So here's where the store manager quit and screwed the company. 1. She hired everyone that applied that week, regardless of skill. 2. She hired everyone at the maximum she was allowed to, $6.50 an hour at the time, more than twice minimum wage. 3. She scheduled all 6 newbies to start their first day on Saturday, our busiest sales day. 4. She told all of the regular employees that they had Saturday and Sunday off. 5. Then she quit at 8 a.m. Saturday morning, an hour before all of us showed up for work. This threw the store into chaos on that first day. Nobody was trained. The area, district, and regional managers had to come in, along with extra employees. Luckily, the district manager's wife was a part-time employee after coming back from maternity leave, so she stepped up as well. It took all summer to recover from her walkout. 3 new employees quit by noon that Saturday, and it took until September for them to get a new store manager. They just rotated through managers from other stores who had to cope with our store. I stayed because I was getting paid double minimum wage, plus time and a half for over 40 hours, or over 8 hours. And double time and a half for over 8 hours that was also over 40 hours. And they needed me for as many hours as I would give them. I worked 6 days a week and often covered 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. because someone would quit. Plus, the night assistant managers would let us take home chicken that we recorded to throw out anyway. I learned a lot, and the area manager lost his job by end of summer. It was hectic, but I made enough money to get a new desktop computer, 386 with color monitor, for school. Next story. Newly minted complete jerk Lieutenant Major U.S. City was well known as an asshole sergeant in his previous command. First tour behind the desk, he tells the 35-year-plus summons guy, who is collecting his blank summons books, he is going to a detail. Summons guy looks at him and tells he is the summons guy, and that's his assignment, for 20-plus years. Lieutenant then tells him that's an order and to get moving. Summons guy looks at him, takes off his shield and upholsters his weapon, places it on the desk, and tells, "All right, I am retiring here and now." What a lot of cops don't know is that this is a huge to-do, and jerk lieutenant, who was book smart and people stupid, realized it. He started backtracking immediately and stuttering, saying, "Don't worry, I will take care of it. You don't have to go." Then he got puppy dog eyes and said, "Don't do this to me." Summons guy gave a short laugh and told him, "You don't understand. I am specifically doing this to you." Went up to the locker room, dressed down, and called it a career. Next story. I worked in a restaurant, and we had a manager who was an old friend of the owner and had 0 restaurant experience. He was incredibly inept, but convinced that he knew everything. As such, he was always barking criticisms, and in a state of constant reprimand. One very busy shift, he fussed at the hostess for something that she was doing, even though she was following company policy. She pulled off her shirt like a hockey player going into a fight, threw it at his feet, and proceeded to roll the back of her middle finger across the center of his forehead and the bridge of his nose, saying, "I quit! I was in awe. Still am. Next story. Supervisor talks with employee. Starts cordial and professional, but slowly devolves into medium heat and defensiveness on each side. They had a really long history. Supervisor finally said, "You seem to forget. You work for me." Pause. Employee takes off name tag, hands it to supervisor, and says, "Not anymore." Next story. Back in college when I waited tables, let's call him Bill, and the manager got into a pretty tense pre-shift discussion about getting back-to-back doubles 3 weekends in a row. The issue wasn't the hours. It was that it was the shittiest section in the house, and both shifts on both days were open and close. In at 10, early cut, big-ass gap. In at 6, close. So the day is starting off pretty dramatic. First full table Bill gets are 4 loud-ass Karens going straight into the passive-aggressive crap. Super picky, and ordering highly complicated off-menu drinks. Complicated enough, the bartender comes over to verify a few things. The Karens give the bartender crap for clarifying their drink orders. Like you're a bartender, don't you know about this? Type crap. It's damn busy. The drinks get sent back twice that I saw. Bill brings back the remade drinks, and one Karen says something like, "This is ridiculous. You know, I just want a glass of white wine. That's easy enough and can't be messed up." Other Karens doing the, "Oh yeah, that's not the right drink," echo chamber crap. Bill picks the drink up, walks off, goes behind the bar, and pours the wine himself. Storms back over to their table, sets it down in front of her and says, "Here's your damn wine. Damn you, this place. I quit." Place goes dead quiet. He takes off his apron, goes to the nearest POS, runs his only 2 closed tickets, hands the CC receipts to our GM, and walks out. A true goddamn hero. Next story. Years ago, I worked briefly for a narcissistic asshole in a very small office. I was never told the detail about how there were 20 people before me in my position who didn't work out. This dude was such a pompous jerk that every question you asked him ended in you being berated for how stupid you are. In addition to his many neurotic rules, like how you had to staple papers in only one very specific place and other such ridiculous crap. I really hoped it would work out because it was one of the very few places that I could work extremely close to my home and therefore go home at lunch, etc. But I finally hit my limit one day when he asked me to make a hotel reservation for him, and I simply asked for how many days when he proceeded to berate me in front of my coworkers and his girlfriend, repeatedly telling me how stupid I was to ask that question. That night I went back in and stapled a big piece of paper 1,000,000 times saying, "I quit," right to the middle of his desk and left my keys. Damn that dude. Zero regrets either. Next story. My first job out of high school at the local Arby's. Less than a week in and a customer comes in, just starts calling the order intake lady all kinds of names. You could hear it through the microphone system they used. I grabbed one of those big-ass potatoes from the oven drawer and domed him right in the face with it. He fell down, gathered himself, and ran out crying, fired on the spot. Later found out it was her ex, and was known to show up at her work and act like this. Next story. Working at Nordia, when a guy chose to quit by standing on desk, dropping pants and undies, and mooning the production manager. He ran out, but forgot his car keys on his desk. Had to bolt back inside 10 minutes later to grab them. Next story. Back in college, and friend and I stopped into Pita Pit for a late-night pita. We each ordered 2 pitas. The employee was the only one working that night. While our food is on the grill, several more customers come in. He looks us dead in the eye and says, "Damn this," and walks out. We had already paid, and slightly drunk, so we finished what the employee had started. We made our own pitas and left. It was awesome. Next story. I worked at a Pop-Tart factory with many different belts to transport product from one end of the plant to the other. This person had had enough, walked down a less frequently traveled path, turned off one little belt, and walked out. We were wondering why we weren't getting any product, but by then the pastries had piled so high, they were falling off of the catwalk. It was a mess to clean up, but it was brilliant. Next story. This one was my brother. He worked at a pretty well-known locally burger joint in the late 80s. A buddy of ours and I would often pick him up from work, and we'd go in an hour or two before his shift was over to play the pinball games they had in the dining area. For whatever reason, he did not get along with an assistant manager there. One day while we are playing the pinball game, I hear them arguing. We were the only people there, and it was almost silent except for our game and, of course, the argument. Out of the corner of my eye, I see something fly through the air. I turned my head in time to see the manager's head engulfed in his apron he had just thrown at her, followed quickly by his hat, then his uniform t-shirt. His skinny ass walked out from behind the counter shirtless and said, "Let's go, now." My buddy was laughing too hard to care about the pinball game, and I wasn't doing too hot at it anyway, so we just left. Next story. Someone at my ambulance company quit, went back to the ambulance garage, and took a dump in the middle of the garage floor before walking out. From that point forward, anyone who quit or was fired had to be walked out by a supervisor. You weren't allowed to be alone once you quit. Next story. I had a horrible boss when I was 19 or so. After a particularly egregious spout of crap, I shot her the double birds and firmly but calmly said, "Damn you, and damn this job," then just walked out. The real fun part was this was in a city, and she lived on my bus route to my other job. About 3 days a week, I'd see her hop on my bus and work her ass off pretending she didn't see me. Next story. Satisfying quitting that I've been personally witness to. Finance guy didn't show up one morning. The finance director kept asking me if he had called in. He didn't email, didn't call. Around noon, he strolls in wearing jeans, flannel shirt, and baseball cap. We were a non-profit, but even on Fridays, that was way too casual of an outfit for this place. He wasn't there more than 5 minutes. As he was walking out, I said, "You're leaving?" "Yeah, I just quit," he said and left. Later, I found out he said his inheritance had come through, and he was moving to Venezuela, I think. Can't remember exactly. As the weeks went by little, it started coming out how awful he was at his job. So probably a good thing the money came through and he quit, because he likely would have been fired at some point. Next story. In my early 20s, I worked at a major gym as admin. I handled payroll, cash flow, reports to head office, sign-up contracts, etc. No one liked the general manager, a toxic, self-obsessed bodybuilder in her early 30s, who did nothing but order people around, get Starbucks, and work out all day. She tried to force me to be her friend, since she had none, by taking me to Starbucks every day. She was my boss, so I had no choice but to indulge her, while carefully giving her no information about the staff, despite her constant prodding. We hired a new sales girl, and her and I hit it off. We became friends, and the GM didn't like this. The GM took the new girl into a meeting and gave her a long speech about how she should watch what she says to me, because I'll tell everyone. The new girl came and told me, and we had a good laugh, but after 5 years of toxic behavior, I was done. I waited for a day the GM didn't come in, and I packed up my entire office without warning, quietly. Left it bare, with all the paperwork undone. The only thing I did before I left was complete payroll, so the staff would get paid, except hers. Damn. The reports, and damn everything else. Next day she came in and left me several sobbing and apologetic voicemails. The voicemails eventually turned into defeated, "Well, you have to return the key." I came back a few days later and threw the key on her desk and said, "You're in your 40s, and you're making up rumors about a 22-year-old? You don't pay me enough for this crap." That 40s comment felt real good. Next story. Married male and single female coworkers were having an affair. It went on a long time. He got caught by the wife, cut off the coworker to try and salvage the marriage, and side piece was not having it. She proceeded to copy and print hundreds of raunchy text messages between the two of them and left piles around every copy machine and in many shared common areas. Then she quit. It was epic. Next story. I used to work in a shop called Madeline, and one of the other dudes was a loose cannon. James, who was the store manager, and the dude, whose name I've forgotten, started shouting at each other in front of customers. The dude ended the altercation by saying, "No one is afraid of you, James. You're a sad, fat, ugly idiot." Ripped his Madeline shirt off and walked out. I never saw that dude again. Next story. Not a crazy quitting, just incredibly calculated and skilled. I, along with others, had to deal with the acquisition of a company that was killed. Killed in that all their computer systems, entirely mainframe, yes, back in the 90s, were wiped. Both programs and data. Backups, you ask? It turned out that the backups, for most of the year, stored file name, and fictitious file size, and fictitious record count. 99% of this company's verification consisted of just checking those 3 items. The internal hard drives had been through the 0-1 overwrite process at least a dozen times, rendering recovery of anything completely impossible. The people from the former company had a pretty good idea of who did it. Guy was a skilled developer, exceptional at his job, and had a freshly minted Ivy League MBA type put over him as a new manager. His complaints to HR were not just ignored, they resulted in reprisals. Things like sending emails to the manager when he arrived and when he left. And all communication had to be via email, which the manager had to review first. The guy lined up a new external job and left. The primary reason everyone was pointing the finger at this guy was he left just after the annual off-site backup test. And the system committed suicide 11 months after that, just before the next test. Next story. Working in Alberta's oil sands for a civil quality control contractor. Halfway through a tech's first day on site, I hear on the radio that they were crying, unfit to drive themselves back to camp, and too distraught to communicate at all, really. I left my duties to go get them. The entire time I spent with the tech that evening and the following day on the way to the company airstrip, they were either crying hysterically or silent. Turned out the concrete foreman had threatened that they'd hit and bury the tech if they turned away any concrete trucks for failing quality control tests. He pulled the same thing with me the following day, and I told him nobody buries anything on this site without a foundation clearance from me, so he'd better plan ahead. Certainly not the friendliest environment for fresh college grads and co-op students, but making $3,000 a week softened the blow somewhat. I hear things have improved slightly up there since then. Next story. At my last job, saw a girl throw a box of steel fasteners at another girl's head because she asked her a question. Manager went to go call the cops. Girl yelled that she couldn't call the cops on her because she quits and just left. To this day, I'm still confused. Next story. I got canned from a London-based airline reservation office. After telling me it was my last day, I went back to my desk and a lady called to book an economy fare to Vancouver. So I upgraded her to first class and only charged for an economy to Toronto. Made me smile. Next story. Steven Slater, a veteran flight attendant, announced over the plane's public address system that he had been abused by a passenger and was quitting his job. He then grabbed and drank 2 beers and exited the plane by deploying the evacuation slide and sliding down it. Next story. This was a quit and drop out in one. Girl 4 years deep in her PhD had been studying this one bacterial strain in mouse models, with experiments lasting well over 6 months in terms of setup and execution. She was at the point of writing her thesis and had already planned how she was going to graduate in the following year. Well, one of the experiments she was doing had her sequence, use DNA to identify what the bacteria is, the stock of the strain she'd been studying for nearly half a decade. Turns out that not only was the bacteria the wrong strain, but it wasn't even within the same family as the organism she thought she was studying. She panicked and told our PI, principal investigator, lab boss, who initially told her to pivot the story to be about the species she had been mistakenly using. But when she found that there was already a pretty big body of work doing almost exactly what she was doing with that species, thus making her work moot, she crashed TF out. It started with a screaming match with the PI, since his initial advice was just to start over with the right strain, and put all the blame on her for not double-checking a stock that had been biobanked with documents backing up the strain identity by 3 senior microbiologists. She stormed out of his office and went to the freezer where the bacterial stocks were, pulling off labels, throwing boxes to the ground, screaming at one of the microbiologists who confronted her in the hallway. But it gets worse. She ran to her bench, lab station where all her tools and chemicals were, and literally wiped all her glass bottles, tools, chemical containers, glass slide boxes, everything, to the ground. The rest of the lab came over to pull her away from all the broken glass she had left on the ground, and she finally broke down crying because she realized her only options were to extend her timeline past her funding limit and pay for grad school out of pocket for 3 years, or master out. A year away from defending her thesis. She mastered out. Next story. I know someone who planned to quit, but didn't give notice because the company, in Brooklyn, had marched other people out right away when they'd done so. This person was working fairly diligently anyway for their planned last couple weeks, but one day they were a few minutes late and got docked 15 minutes or an hour's pay. So they were grumbling on the shop floor about this, calling it BS. A manager heard this, told HR, and HR came out to ask if there was a problem. The person said, "Yes, your penalty for my being late today is BS. I'm out," and left on the spot. It seemed pretty dramatic, actually wasn't, and the person became a bit of a legend. Next story. When I used to work at Petco, one of the employees was going to a Mexican restaurant to get food for her lunch. She asked if anyone wanted anything. One guy said yes. They walk to the back so he can give her cash and tell her the order. She leaves. After about 10 minutes, she runs in crying. She pulls me aside and says, "That asshole told me to go ask for carne asada and a verga burrito." When she was placing the order, she asked for it. The guy responded with, "Do you know what that is?" "It's a jerk's burrito." She got so embarrassed she ran. Well, as she talking to me and crying back in our store, I see the owner of that restaurant walk in and ask to speak to the manager. Right after the talk, he left, but told her, "Don't worry, next time lunch on me." The employees was put on a 2-day suspension, but he said, "Yeah, never mind, I quit," and walked out. Next story. I don't remember what exactly was the straw that broke the camel's back, but it came from the KFC shift manager mid-shift. I had been trying to bottle up the incompetence of the franchise's owners for a while. Through the 3 store managers they went through that year, actually. I quietly went to the bathroom and changed out of my uniform. I came out, went to the customer side of the counter, slammed my stuff down and said, "Here's your uniform, here's your headset, and you can shove them both up your fat ass, Chrissy." Jimmy, the 70-year-old retiree whose only job was manning the buffet and several other customers, laughed aloud and clapped as I left. The most hilarious and idiotic part? I was rehired within the year. Next story. Worked at a Target warehouse for about 2 years. And for a bit of that time, we worked with this absolute asshole. A group of us had reported him multiple times for putting us in unsafe situations. Pushing boxes at us while we were actively cutting boxes. Throwing cardboard into other pack stations. Becoming volatile when he felt he was faster than whoever he was packing with. And countless other things. And HR and our OMs did nothing about it. One day he was getting a safety audit from a trainer who was injured, and he openly was calling her a useless, accused her of discriminating against him because of his age, nearing 50, and told her to go bully someone else. She had dealt with him so many times that she was fed up. She took her vest off and threw it at him along with her clipboard and screamed, "Damn you, I don't get paid enough to deal with your crap." He was indeed racist. She then pushed boxes off of his line and stormed out of the building yelling, "Damn you!" as she left, with the OM chasing after her, begging her to calm down. And then she turned to him and called him spineless for not dealing with him when he'd been reported. She was yelling so loud you could hear her over the powered equipment, the industrial fans, the cardboard compactor, everything. The guy ended up getting fired a few weeks later. He cried on the way out, and they begged her to come back. She refused, and now she has a pretty successful lash/skincare business as an esthetician. It felt like reality TV. Next story. I worked for a family-owned pizza and sub shop in the Outer Banks in my 20s. I was a bartender, the kind of place where the husband runs the kitchen and the wife runs the front of the house. You know the type. The family was Greek, and the husband would yell, cuss, and even throw things at employees when he was mad. Finally, after hearing this dude yell and scream all the time, and treat all the employees like crap, I made myself 2 giant margaritas in the middle of a huge rush and walked out. They had no one to take to-go orders, no one to make drinks, and no one serving the guests who sat at the bar. Damn you, tomato patch. Next story. I was a waitress at this restaurant. Every night we had cleaning duties, and the manager would always make the women clean the salsa bar. I got so tired of doing that every night, so I switched duties with my coworker. I swept while he cleaned the bar. Manager saw this and started freaking out. After trying to reason with them, I said, "Damn it, I quit." The coworker quit right after too. 2 down in one night. Next story. I worked at a shady bar, and they fired a bartender and tried to keep their last check. The next week, the place was full of city inspectors, following up on complaints of fruit flies, shows that were over capacity, fire extinguishers that hadn't been checked, minors serving and being served alcohol, and unpaid wages. It was beautiful. Next story. Back when I ran movie theaters, a manager walked off on Christmas Day. He left a note and his keys on the desk and walked out. The owner of the chain had piled his family into the car to see their new 6 million theater in action. It's one of the busiest days of the year. Everything was selling out. When they went inside the office, the assistant manager was reading the note. He saw the owner walking in, handed him the note and said, "This is for you," and ran off to start some movies. Next story. Before I worked my obligatory stint at McDonald's in high school, one of the kids a grade or so ahead of me announcing they quit by pulling all the fire extinguisher rings over the grills and fryers. From then on, if any of us were let go or said we quit, We weren't allowed behind the counter for fear of a reprisal of the stunt. Next story. Working for Starbucks, I got a better offer at the local college while also asking to transfer stores. My request was denied because our district manager came by and said I should be smiling more when working peak on bar. Smiled enough but wants to see more. Needed more development before a transfer could be approved. I was the fastest on bar during peak and they couldn't afford to lose me. The other store requested me by name. My manager sucked. She just wasn't good at her job. Career fast food manager somehow. After my transfer was denied, I handed in my 2 weeks in a sealed envelope to her face. Had it ready just in case. Without opening it, she says, "Oh, I've gotten plenty of these in my lifetime." And all I could say back was, "It shows." Next story. I worked at a grocery store when I was 16 on summer break. There was a kid who had a job as a bag boy, which he got ostensibly because his mother, Diane, had worked in the deli for like 10 plus years. One day he got into an argument with his mother that left her in tears. The management was pissed and fired him. As he was leaving, he grabbed a microphone at a checkout lane and said on the store's loudspeaker, "Diane, get lost, please." Next story. I worked at an Italian bakery for one day. My friend was training me, and it was going all right. Turns out there's a billion different kinds of meat, cheese, and bread, and also a billion different ways to cut it, and people are very picky. Near the end of the day, I was exhausted, and I heard the owner calling me and my friend to the back. Turns out, sewage was filling up the dishwasher sink and pouring onto the floor, and he told us to clean it up. I asked for a mop, and he said it broke, and handed me a roll of paper towels and said, "I'm heading out for the night. Let me know if you're able to get it clean." So I just walked out with him. Did my friend absolutely dirty, which I feel bad about, but like, nah. Next story. We had a contractor from a company working our guard shack for a truck depot. She was awesome. She did great inspections, was friendly, and was just a really good employee. The company she worked for basically lost our services due to billing, other stuff. We let her know, and she went on the shack. Tossed keyboard, computer, poured Windex everywhere, tossed the chair, the trash can out into the gate lanes, threw her safety vest off, got in her car, and burned out of the parking lot. It was epic. Next story. It's my favorite. So I managed a CTC parts department. I was leaving to go to another city, so I was on my last month there. I was told that a manager shouldn't hire their own replacement. Nobody in the department was suitable to promote, so the store manager was going to choose the person. The person he chose was a guy that the year before I had fired. I fired him because he was super unreliable, skipping shifts and being late, and didn't care at all about the job at all. I told the store manager all of this. Nope, he's got a kid now. He's going to be responsible now with a wife and kid at home to provide for. I told him that just having kids doesn't make you responsible. In fact, the baby wasn't baby, so in my opinion, it actually proved the opposite. But I was leaving, so really, I didn't really give much of who they hired. I spent 3 weeks training him. The entire time, it was very clear that he didn't give a crap what I was telling him. He was constantly slacking, and I'd catch him hiding on his phone, and screwing up the same things over and over again. Finally, I left. 2 days later, I was out at the grocery store at noon, grabbing some stuff. Saw that same idiot climbing into a drywall company van after the crew was grabbing lunch. Went over to my old job and asked. The day after I left, and he was left on his own to actually do the job, he went out for lunch and never came back. Next story. Okay, here's mine. I was working as an apartment maintenance guy, roughly 10 years experience overall. I was supposed to get a sign-on bonus of $5K for a new complex. The owner brought his girlfriend in and switched managers for the day. She did my review, and of course I didn't get the bonus. So I get pissed off, already yelling at each other. I pushed the desk over on her and threw my keys into her face. When I went to leave, I have a case of ceramic tile which I heaved out of my truck right through the T-tops of her brand new Vet that the owner just bought her that morning. I leave and call my girlfriend and told her what I did. She worked for an answering service. Early 80s, no cell phones. So yeah, she answered mostly company-type accounts. She answered for 5 bail bond services, who all told her if she arrested, call us, we'll get you out for free. I told her to call whoever owes you the biggest favor for me. I was never arrested or fined, never had to pay anything, and got away with it. The owner had a history of screwing people out of their hard-earned money. I did get some free drinks out of it, and heard some great stories. Next story. I once went into my huge local Sainsbury's, which I previously had the extraordinary misfortune to have worked in myself, some years before, as a customer. I was intrigued when I went into the produce aisle, fruits and vegetables. There was nothing but cucumbers, thousands of cucumbers. No potatoes, no tomatoes, no grapes, onions, leeks, herbs, carrots, all the dozens of different fruits and vegetables. Just cucumbers. There were crates of the things everywhere. Now, as a former trainee manager, I knew a bit about what must have gone into this situation. The first thing that I knew was that the store manager and most of the management team of that particular branch, I knew all too well, were absolute see you next Tuesdays, if you get my meaning. Completely and utterly horrible in every way. A lot of the heavy lifting, management-wise, was actually done by section managers, a much lower status of employee than, confusingly, the actual managerial level. The whole place was riddled with hierarchy, underpinned by sexism, ridiculous class division, and, for all I knew, racism. Fair enough, you might think, if you worked just about anywhere in retail at the time. But just imagine this if you can. This place was actually worse than everywhere else. It was, for instance, extremely difficult to climb up the career ladder from the shop floor. Proper managers usually had a degree and fancied themselves entirely superior to their underlings. Many of these overutilized, underpaid, overstressed section managers were so oppressed, insulted, and demeaned that it wasn't at all unusual to find one walking around with a resignation on the spot letter tucked into one of the pockets in their brown polyester uniform. "Just one more thing will push me over the edge, man," some of them would mutter. But it was a time of high unemployment, and although there were regular stormouts, leaving a sudden staffing gap on the shop floor, most of these people just gritted their teeth and hung on. Now, it was actually, even back then, over 30 years ago, very difficult to massively overorder a vegetable due to protocols within the ordering system. It would also have been extremely difficult to cancel the regular ordering of other items. Yet someone had done this to an extraordinary extent. Total annihilation of the fail-safe system, you could say. I don't know who it was that resigned. I don't know why they resigned, although I would bet my life they had very good reason. But more than anything, I don't know how the hell they managed the cucumber stunt. But one thing is for certain, their department manager, who was supposed to oversee the situation, and who got paid a lot more than the section manager, should have been paying some kind of attention. Evidently, like many department managers, he had outsourced just about all his work to his underling, including any kind of oversight. Presumably, he was, even as I was stood there looking at his nemesis's handiwork, having the worst day of his life. Very likely, also his last day at Sainsbury's. If you are ever in an awful corporate situation, it's an option worth thinking about. You too can achieve something that people will remember for decades afterwards. All you need is wits, determination, systematic planning, and the fire of resentment burning deep within. You too could go full nuclear. I will never forget the sight of all those cucumbers. It was epic. Legend. Next story. Managers fired me where customers could hear, so I threw my shirt on the floor. I had a sports bra on, nothing they could do. Put my hoodie back on over it, and announced at the exit that the managers are cruel idiots, and my day of reckoning would come. None of those managers, nor the HR rep who collaborated to fire me, work there anymore, and they caught an EEOC violation. So I'm going to say mission accomplished. Next story. Nothing beats the silent chaos quit. No yelling, no, "I'll have your job." Just a slow unraveling of clothes and sanity until management is powerless to stop it. Managers still probably replaying that scene in their head once a week. Next story. I was working at this call center, taking yet another supervisor call because it was going to take 3 hours on dial-up to download new drivers for your printer, and the customer thought I should know. Shows you how long ago this happened. Anyways, this former employee took the time to wear tearaway pants, a loose-fitting shirt, the most modest of covering, and perhaps the neatest writing of "I quit" one can do on one's own ass checks I've ever seen. Next story. A guy came to work and not clocked in, was told he was going to get an assignment he did not want, and said he would do anything else. They said no, he was going to do it. Since his shift didn't start, he told them, "Fine, I will go home sick." Management was pissed and tried to get him fired for refusing an assignment. Union stepped in and said he could not refuse the assignment he never officially received as his shift had not started. They gave him his job back, and he did the "F you, I quit" funny guy. Next story. When I saw Slipknot ages ago, 5 minutes into their set, I saw a security guard headbanging, then rip his security uniform shirt off, had shirt underneath, and jump onto the floor and join the crowd. Was pretty rock and roll. I hope he didn't fire. Next story. I was at work at the prison on an overnight shift. Kitchen officer came in at 3 a.m., and by 5 a.m., he stripped down to his underwear and walked to the front sally port like that. Dude was a legend for months afterwards. Next story. Crazy? Yes. Yes, I worked in a call center 20 years ago that was a third party for other clients. Think cable, phone, etc. We would act like customer service reps, but we were getting paid a lot less because we weren't working directly for the company. What this meant was a lot of the folks that worked there didn't really care. I used to joke that they'd go down the street collecting whoever, as it was barely above minimum wage. You had people who used it like a stepping stone like me. You had people that were 5 seconds from way too much. The job wasn't much to lose, so they decided one day to do random drug testing. This was hilarious. A ton of people clocked in, read the email, and proceeded out the door. One lady in her late 20s decided to go in the bathroom, crap on the ground, and put her badge in it. I guess that's one way to make a statement. Next story. Worked for an electrical company in Pennsylvania. Company hires sketchy guy to help with summer workload. After a week, his personal truck breaks down, and he convinces the owner to let him borrow a work truck overnight so he can get to work the next day. He's a no-show, no-call, but our work trucks have GPS, so they pull up the tracking app and the work truck pings in Colorado. This is about the time a manager realized a generator and other tools are missing from the tool room. Not too long after that, the truck's responder stopped, and Mr. James disappeared into the sunset. Next story. Many years ago at a small local fried chicken place with a behemoth of a manager, probably 6 feet 5 inches or better, easily 300 pounds, and a small Asian girl, maybe feet, and 120 pounds or less. There were some words between the girl and another guy washing dishes. Before anyone knew what happened, she jumped and mounted this guy's upper half and landed a good 10 to 15 blows on his head and shoulders before the manager got to them and hauled her off the dude still kicking and swinging out the back door, and that was the last I saw of her. Next story. Back in 2016, I worked at a small office. A new employee on his first day sat in the desk in front of mine. He had spent an hour a few days earlier for some training with the boss. After 10 minutes of him just moving the mouse around, he turned to me and said, "I will be back. I need to go to the store to get eye drops." The line must have been extremely long. He never returned. Some say he is still out getting eye drops to this day. Next story. Worked at a construction company, and the yard maintenance guy had found a new job. He came into the office to give his notice, and the boss got mad and said, "Well, I hope the grass is greener on the other side." The employee came back with, "Actually it is. It's AstroTurf." Couldn't help myself and started laughing out loud. Then he walked out the door and left to start his new career installing fake grass. Next story. This doesn't fit exactly, but I seriously tried to quit in as crazy a way as possible, and wasn't fired because my boss was just crazier than me. Buckle up, dear readers. I had worked for years for a construction company at their only satellite office, and under a manager who was quite literally a narcissist. He was dreadful to deal with, and whenever a new guy showed up, he had to ramp up the horrible to show he was in control by treating us longtime employees like hell. This happened one stormy morning just after arriving. He's doling out daily tasks with typical micromanagement, and then gives me wrong directions about the length of stock metal I am supposed to cut. I make one cut, and it is, of course, wrong, and he begins his vocal tirade of how incompetent I am in front of everyone. I try to explain. He said, "The length is X," but he was having none of it, and saying I needed to start paying better attention to my job. I suddenly became so pissed at his behavior when I knew it wasn't me, and told him to set the length himself if he thought I was so inept, but he refused, told me again to do my job right this time, and walked off. I was livid at this point that all of this was happening right in front of everyone, and I snapped. I hurled my tape measure and nailed him square in the back between the shoulders. He stopped. I figured I'd righty earned my ticket home and was startled at what I'd just done, as I am a peaceful person and have never even been in a fist fight before. But he just said, "Make the cut!" without even turning around. I walked up behind him and screamed right in his ear, "No, you make the cut!" Again, calmly, he says, "No, you're going to do it." So I once more yell at him, still unsure how I didn't stroke out in my anger, "No, Get your ass over there and you do it. Instead of firing me like he should have, he turns and heads for the back door and out into the pounding rain. I was committed to seeing it through and told one of the guys nearest to the door, "Lock it!" Nobody moved, so I go over and slide the heavy deadbolt into place. There's no way he's getting back in that way. I see him in his truck outside the window. He starts it up and flies out of the yard, spraying gravel as he goes flying down the driveway to the highway, and is gone. He'd never done that before, but I'd also never once hinted at standing up to his bullying before either. Then I go to the office door leading outside, lock it as well, which I know he has a key to, but thankfully, the door that leads out of the office into the shop itself is only lockable from the inside of the shop. So I turn that and am oh so satisfied he's trapped outside whenever he decides to come back. My heart was pounding, and I felt this vertigo-like feeling in my head, almost dreamlike in sensation, like I was watching myself do all this from outside my body. The new guy is just taking it all in and then says, "Man, this place is toxic." Yeah, he's not wrong. I try to actually focus and do my job for a few minutes, but I am just salivating knowing he'll be back soon enough and will be trapped from entering in any meaningful way, and I am completely resigned to the fact this is my last day. One of the workers informs me after a few minutes that a delivery truck has made an unexpected arrival, which means I have to unlock the door and go out to receive the 18-wheeler's stock lengths of metal, which also means opening up the large doors to bring them in with a forklift. I start the process, and before I can even get the material inside, my manager pulls back up and enters in, and proceeds as if nothing had happened at all. No hint of anger, and not a word was said to me about the tape measure assault or my screaming fit at him. Not only was I not fired, I worked there for another 5 years, and although he was still hell to deal with, thankfully he never went off like that again. Next story. This was a friend of mine who was hired to be a manager and then completely screwed over by the company that hired him. They were merged into private equity, and the PE wanted them offering new services that no one knew how to do exactly. My friend was referred over, and they hired him as manager in waiting while he kicked off that new division. He brought a ton of experience with him. Shortly after getting there, he realized they had crap him into the door, and a management position was never going to happen. The only managers we had were all friends and family of the previous owner, exclusively. The guy hired deserves it, and had the knowledge. Unbeknownst to them, he never let on that he had caught on and played the long game against them. He built an entirely new division and kept working around every time they were trying to get him to train their friends and relatives on how to run it. Eventually, after a year of stringing him along and having him kill it building this new division, they promoted a damn moron that none of us liked, but management loved because he was a suck pump under their desks on the regular. They then pitched my friend they were planning an even bigger and better regional manager position for him. "We need you to train our guy on how to do all of this, and train some employees on how to do the work so we can get you promoted, buddy." This still makes me laugh my ass off thinking about it. He intentionally trained their hand-picked manager wrong, so the guy would fall on his face. Fed him crap on how to sell contracts for the work, and how to lay them out. After seeing some of my buddies, contracts, it gets better. He was a sales machine, and sold over $1 million in contracts. Except, he was using fake codes and terminology that didn't exist in the system. And since no one had any experience, they wouldn't be able to figure out what he was talking about, nor how he was selling it. Of the 3 guys he trained, he helped them get better pay and benefits at a competitor, and they started leaving a month before he quit. During that month, he sold his ass off, selling another $250K in work that needed done, work only he could do. There wasn't any big blow-up or anything like that. Instead, he deleted all of his files and emails, reformatted his computer and cell phone, and left them on his desk along with his keys the Friday of a 3-day weekend. He was scheduled to be working 80-hour weeks to cover the work once he got back. Yeah, he notified me beforehand what was up. The only blow-up was he spent his time there documenting everything, including his sales metrics, every contract he sold, all of the work he brought in, etc., as well as their emails promising him non-existent manager jobs. He sent that to the corporate offices of the PE firm and let them know that his department was about to implode, and here's why. Naturally, they have the "we will look into this." The only response he got was other offices acquired by the PE calling to ask if he would be willing to relocate and help turn their profits around. Within 2 months, 90% of the people involved in it were fired or demoted. The division he created took a complete crap and closed up in under a year, and they lost all of that work and put that office deep in the red. I still laugh my ass off at how cunning and strategic that whole thing was. Anyways, damn BlackRock. Next story. Not me, but my line manager and her colleagues. She had an absolute cunt of an area manager who was idle, incompetent, and dim. LM got on her bad side by borrowing her boyfriend's Mercedes, his work vehicle which he hated, and driving it to work. You can't have a better car than me. I'm your superior. Now the AM was a greedy woman, and area meetings were held in local restaurants. She would stuff her face and expect the LMs to pick up the bill. It couldn't be expensed. She never brought cash or cards, and she would threaten anyone who refused. So AM called the monthly meeting. The LMs turn up, order nothing, and watch her eat. At the end, she says, "Pay up." Each one stood up and informed her they were resigning with immediate effect due to bullying, and the union solicitor would be in touch. I'd like to say she was arrested, forced to wash dishes, / beaten by the waiters. Life isn't so neat. What I do know is that she vanished from the industry. Next story. Exact opposite of what was asked. The lamest way I've seen someone quit is when I was a supervisor. Checking my email, I saw one from one of my team to me and the manager above me. "Today will be my last day." I look up questioningly to the employee to see her putting on her coat on the way out the door. At the time, I agreed with the manager that it was a really unprofessional way to quit. But as I got older, I'm kind of in awe of it. Next story. I worked at a bank, and we had a nasty manager that would spend the day looking for reasons to write us up instead of actually doing her job. One day, she decided to write this guy up for some lame reason. He was younger and didn't have a filter. He told her to shove the job up her ass. The part that had me cracking up is he told her wear longer skirts because everyone could see she went natural every time she leaned over. My manager was so pissed and embarrassed. He started squawking at her as he walked by because she had a really large beak-like nose. Next story. Worked at a Kmart distribution center. Manager told us day of, we needed to work a 12-hour day without breaks to meet the quota needed. I was the newest, non-conveyor employee. For some reason, everyone looked to me at break time. Well, I took my break, and then people started going by saying they were getting write-ups for taking their break. Manager was calling people into the office, 2 people at a time. Before he could say anything, I said, "You giving out write-ups? Save the paper, I'm going home." He chased me all the way to the parking lot and proceeded to call me for 3 weeks to see if I quit. Next story. I worked for a real prick at a healthcare organization. During a meeting, I informed senior leadership that we had issues with an upcoming audit, and I outlined what those issues were. After the meeting, he called me into his office, closed the door, and started throwing crap around the room. He was pissed I had told the truth to leadership. I knew that day I was going to quit. So, I slowly started cleaning out my cubicle, getting rid of paperwork, and slowly taking my personal stuff home so he wouldn't notice. All the while, I was applying for open positions outside the company. When I finally had a job offer, I typed up a very generic but pleasant notice letter and handed it to him. He told me I could leave that day because my new employer was a conflict of interest. I told him, "You will pay me for the next 2 weeks." He said no. So I said, "Let's call HR, shall we?" He did, and hung up saying, "I guess we'll be paying you for the next 2 weeks. Next story. I worked for a company that saw seasonal peaks and valleys. We were at the tail end of a new product launch that was behind schedule, so management put that particular crew on mandatory OT, with their 4 10-hour days going to 5 10-hour days for something like 6 to 8 weeks. This was 2008 to 2009, and we were located in a rural area, so not boatloads of other opportunities. There was an older guy that got up from that meeting, cleaned out his locker, and walked out. Didn't even finish his shift. He said he had no interest in the OT, and hated that his schedule wasn't firm. He wanted to know exactly what he was doing and when. I heard he transitioned to truck driving. Next story. I was a new teacher with a mentor teacher. We had first block planning. One day we get asked to watch a class where the teacher nor sub has arrived. While walking around the classroom, we thought, man, this classroom is so empty of any personalization. Sure enough, on the desk was a post-it note that said, "I can't do this anymore." Next story. I had a job for a week. My supervisor, who sucked at her job, took a day off and left me work that I was not qualified to do. She knew this. I was hired to do something else. A few days went by, and she did other stuff that pissed me off. The last straw was when she told me the client complained about the work I did while she was out. The work she knew I wasn't qualified to do, and said it was the worst he'd ever seen. I was done. At lunchtime, I took my stuff, got in my car, and hit the highway. Literally. I went home and never went back to that job. I was in my early 20s, and my parents told me I should at least tell them I quit. I didn't want to, but I called and told the supervisor all the reasons why I wasn't coming back. I don't even remember her reaction. I didn't care. I had interviewed and was offered another job at the same time as the one that I quit. I called the other company the day I quit, and they asked me to start the very next day. I ended up staying with them for 2 to 3 years. Next story. I worked with a guy that quit right in the middle of a tire sale. Some dude was giving him grief, and he said, "Damn this crap," took off his clip-on tie, threw it on the parts counter, and walked out. That happened almost 40 years ago, and still remember it like yesterday. Another tale from the parts counter. I knew a guy that tried to light a customer on fire with a can of brake clean, so of course that was his last day. The moral of this story? Probably tread a little lightly with parts guys. They are prone to snap. Next story. This guy did his training, which took about a week and a half to 2 weeks at this pest control company I worked at. The day they let him off on his own in a company vehicle, he vanishes off the radar, and nobody notices until about 4 or 5 hours later. Turns out he sold some of the expensive equipment in the van at a pawn shop and went on a smoking binge. Later that day, he was caught by the police because he crashed the company van. Dude played the long game on that deal. Epic. Next story. Well, I had planned out setting the vault lock timer to 7 days if I ever did quit my former career, knowing the boss was too much of a cheap bastard to pay for a locksmith. Fortunately, I never had to do it. It would have shut the branch down for a week, and they would have lost millions in revenue or had to replace the locking mechanism and possibly the vault door, which would have cost a mint. I loved my job, but figured that would be the best way to say, "Damn you, I quit." Next story. I waited tables in college for tuition, or room, board, food, your pick. Got hired at what would then qualify as a fancy by Midwest middle-class values chain steakhouse, but the head manager hated me. He was Conan O'Brien tall, with the looks of the principal from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He constantly henpecked me for crap, but I could make triple the tips at this job, more than any other local restaurant, so I tried to suck it up. He started hiding behind corners and jumping out to scare me, which he did. I was a damn nervous wreck. Friday night, I arrive for work at 4 p.m. and to set up my station. I am tasked with filling the crystal sugar bowls, all 200 of them. I finish and try to lift the tray of 100. One of those oversized server trays, and I was tiny. 5 feet 3 inches, 98 pounds. Tiny. As I slowly make my way to the dining room, I round a corner, and there he is. The tray on my shoulder? We were required to carry all trays on our shoulders. I crap you not. The tray on my shoulder, filled with crystal sugar bowls filled with sugar, bumps into him as he attempted to scare me, and slides off the back of my shoulder, crashing down to the floor, breaking everything. Sugar everywhere. He screamed at me. All I heard was, "Damn idiot." I burst into tears and left, never to return. Next story. Years ago, it was a job in my field right out of college, and it was constant bullying from my power-tripping manager, and my complaints to her manager and HR were ignored. Found another gig and submitted my 2-week notice. The final straw was taking away my key to the building with a week and a half to go. She ignored my knocks, but still wrote me up 3 times in 2 days for punching in late. Decided that I did not have to put up with any more of her crap. With another job lined up and unused PTO, I quietly packed up all my personal stuff, then left a post-it that just said, "Damn you," manager's name, on my desk. I waited until the coast was clear, then crept out the back door without saying a word. HR called me a few hours later asking where I was. All I said is I would be happy to discuss the situation at a later time with my lawyer, since they chose to ignore all the bullying I reported. Next story. Not quitting, but this is the weirdest separation I've ever experienced. We had a system admin, Matt, a couple of years ago that worked fully remote, and we really started to feel like he was working another job. He was late for meetings or missed them altogether. He was rarely online during work hours. He barely worked on tickets, and generally just felt like he was phoning it in. So we finally decided to let him go. So whenever we do these in the post-COVID world, it's a Teams meeting with the manager and HR. So one of my direct reports, we'll call him James, got on a one-on-one call with him. He was late, and Nina from HR. The call literally lasted 46 seconds. So we've made the decision to let you go. Oh, thank Christ. Nina is here to take you through the next steps. Can you turn on your camera so we can see your face? No, I don't think I will. Okay. Well, I want to go over the benefits you are entitled to with you. You have my personal email. You can just email that to me. Well, I'd like to review them and see if you have any questions. No, you can just email me. Okay. Okay, thanks. We spent so much more time meeting and stressing over whether to make the decision and whether it was the right one, and he was completely disinterested. I've done lots of separations over the years, and I've never had one like that. Next story. I am an engineering who manages engineers. We had an engineering put in his 2 weeks notice. He didn't work for me and wasn't that great of a worker. He told HR he was going to spend more time with his family. He was in my office with a few other engineers telling us how he was going to our competitor as a sales engineer. I asked how he wasn't walked out when he told HR. He laughed and told us about the lie. 5 minutes later, security comes to collect him and walk him out of the office. I simply thought HR figured it out. It turned out that he has gotten into the sales drive and made a copy. He was told if he did return the drive, they wouldn't press charges. Downstairs, security handed him over to the police. 6 months later, I asked a friend at our competitor how he was doing. He told me he worked there for a week, and the company would not even give him email access during the week. Then he was fired. Not sure how they found out what happened. Next story. I worked at this place called Beef City Beef. It was shady from the start. They paid me under the table. One day, I was working with a customer buying a very large beef order when the asshole manager shows up, interrupts me, and takes over the order. The order required a $500 deposit. After the order was placed, loaded, and delivered, the manager asked me where that $500 down payment was. I said I didn't take it. You interrupted me before I got it. He basically called me a liar and said I had to pay back this $500. Well, I wasn't going to stand for that. I went to the labor board and I told them what was going on at that place. They said, "Do you have pay stubs?" I said no, but I think I can get them. I went back to BCB and told them, hey, I think I can get a loan for that $500, but I need my pay stubs to show my income. So he went to his checkbook and tore them out and gave them to me. I took them to the labor board and they shut down Beef City Beef. Next story. About 12 years ago, a coworker was constantly, like every single day, late. She was reprimanded by the supervisor and told to be on time. There were no other repercussions. No write-up, no nothing. She walked back in the main office, grabbed her few personal items, said, "Damn yours all," to us, her coworkers, and the people that had covered for her, and she walked out. This was on a Thursday. She called in on Monday and tried to play it off as a joke. She was told not to return. Next story. A friend worked a service job driving a truck, delivering chemicals for almost 10 years. Hard, physical job. The manager was a complete a-hole. Always told them they sucked, were lucky to have jobs, etc. Never a nice word, and these guys worked hard. Friend was dependable and nice, very patient, and just sucked it up due to good pay. Finally decided he is done and calls in sick to attend an interview. Boss texts him that this is unacceptable. Friend gets job, so texts back, "I'm sorry. I can guarantee this will never happen again." When he returns to work, boss makes a big show of chewing him out in front of everyone. Friend says, "I'm so sorry, I hate to interrupt, but this is for you," and hands him a resignation letter. Said his boss almost cried and said, "This proves you don't care about us." He always says 10 out of 10 would do it again. Next story. Use work at Buffalo Wild Wings as assistant trainer. I hated the job, but I was young and made decent money at time and could work 80 hours a week if I really wanted to. Sometimes I go to different stores when they needed help, or to help train staff, or for store openings, etc. One day I was asked go work at certain store because half kitchen staff quit that day, and they walk out right after a very busy lunch rush. Well, I guess on the way out, one of cooks dropped all fryer baskets full of chicken wings and dropped them all at once, and nobody noticed till it was too late, because most of cooks on duty walk out. When I got there, was oil all over floor from overflow, and they were trying to figure out what to do with about 1,000 wings they didn't need. Next story. I worked at a music venue fresh out of high school, or maybe I was still in high school, can't recall. Anyways, dude had enough of being security, rushed the main stage, ripped the mic out of the performer's hand, and just starts rapping to the crowd. Lots of boos. Extremely embarrassing on all counts. He only got past stage security because he himself was wearing a security shirt, and they initially thought he was responding to an incident they weren't aware of. Next story. Worked in a call center for a major cable cell company in the States. One of the guys was completely fed up with the job, and a few of the managers. He came in with his set of bagpipes, walked to the middle of the floor, and just let them rip. Lasted about 10 minutes before he said, "Oh, by the way, damn you, Connie." I forgot her actual name, was similar to that though. "I quit!" and walked out. Was glorious. And the added bonus was, he was pretty good at playing them. Next story. I worked for a major corporation in the 80s. All the people on the sales team were given a company car. The first day of employment. One of the people drove off after lunch and never brought the car back. I don't remember what happened, but I imagine they got the police on it. Next story. I work side by side with this one old-timer. 40 years at this job. During his 40th year, we got a new manager, and he started this, "Do what I say because I said so." After a few emails back and forth, my buddy writes, "I don't give a rat ass," and the chain sends it to all managers in the department. A few days later, he gets his written up PIP. A few weeks later, he puts in his 2-week notice. I went online and found "I don't give a rat ass" patch and bought it. I gave it to my friend and told him to wear it on his uniform on his last day. He didn't do that, but taped to the entrance to our department. All day long, all these managers were walking next to that "I don't give a rat ass day" sign and didn't notice it. We had great laughs about it. Next story. Not necessarily quit, but got fired over this. 2 IT guys went to one of our local German restaurants. Pubs at noon used the company credit card. Came back at 8:30 p.m. Completely tanked. Crazy part was, one site supervisor told them get a Uber or Lyft or get fired. Even offered to pay for it. Guys told him to get lost, got in their cars, and were promptly fired. Another separate incident involving a IT professional here was he got raided at work by the FBI for being, let's call it a diddler. Craziest thing I've seen. Damn near ripped the paint off his office wall after taking everything. Think it was FBI and CPS in full gear. Next story. Coworker didn't quit, but retired in the most unhinged way. He didn't tell anyone until like an hour before he was leaving. Obviously he told HR, but no one in building. He sold everything he owned, left the building, and went straight to the airport with nothing but the clothes on his back and his cell phone. He said anything he needs he'll buy when he arrives at his destination. Next story. I knew someone who worked at a fish and chips place. He got into a big argument with the shift manager and said he quit. Then he grabbed the manager's spare pair of shoes and dumped them in the chowder pot on the way out. Next story. Before my time, but there's a bit of a legend here at work. They fired this lady who had been drinking on the job, and she stole someone's key card and came in after hours and peed on her manager's desk. Next story. I got fired for rolling my eyes after being told to clean a window I had just cleaned. It was at a wing delivery joint, and I was a driver who lived off tips, so making me waste 90 minutes cleaning giant storefront windows twice was basically slave-tier behavior. Unlucky for her, the entire driver force were all friends prior to working there. The following weekend was the biggest college football game of the season, and top 3 the biggest days of the year for the restaurant. Every driver works that day. Well, not that day. 0 drivers showed up. Watched her deliver about 4 orders herself before they just closed it down for the day. Restaurant closed permanently about 2 months later. It was beyond satisfying. Next story. Back in 2010-ish, I worked as an IT guy managing a HRMS. My office was located in and amongst the HR pay benefits staff. To say the place was dysfunctional doesn't even begin to cover it. Anyhow, the HR folks hired on a 20-something guy. He showed up for his first day, and then never again. Apparently, when called and asked about where to send the check for his 1 day of work, he replied, "You know what? Never mind. You keep it." I've always thought that was hilarious. Next story. I work with a lot of youth, and one of them got caught double-dipping 2 jobs. He called in sick at our job, and his supervisor ended up going out to dinner at the second job where the kid worked, and he was stunned when he walked up to serve him. The kid ended up submitting a letter of resignation to us, and when we read it, it seemed so familiar. We did an online search, and it was Dwight Schrute's resignation letter from Dunder Mifflin. Word for word. We second-guessed our decision and wondered if we just let the greatest kid ever go. Baller move. I want to go out like that someday. Next story. A guy came in dressed up in a suit and tie and brought in a cake that said "I quit" on it. He said, "I'm leaving as soon as I get my check." And his supervisor came in. First word out of his mouth was, "Checks are going to be late. Unrelated, I think it's BS." This guy has come back 3 times since then. 2 of the 3 times he quit, he didn't put in a 2-week notice, but they blacklist everyone else who doesn't. Next story, I've quit quite a bit, and I'm, or rather used to be more so, thank you therapy, chaotic and self-destructive. My first was a good one, and somewhat similar to the above. Arrived to work at a cafe in the middle of a shopping center. I was 17 and in college at the time. Go upstairs to change my shirt, etc., as the storerooms are far away from the actual shops and open floor businesses themselves. Get onto the floor at 9:02. Boss absolutely berates me, and I'd had a bit of a week as it was. I took my shirt off while sat across the table in the middle of the shopping center, as it was on a sunken floor with a few steps around it rather than a walled building, chucked the keys at him, and stormed off to the storeroom to grab my bits, pissed off and sad all the same, and teary-eyed, shouting at him to stop touching me as he was trying to convince me not to leave, screamed at him to open the door and let me get my stuff as he fumbled the keys. Prick. Second one, definitely better. Worked at a fine dining restaurant in Cornwall. Half-decent gaff with spontaneous celebrity visits here and there. So anyway, we figure that the chef owner is stealing tips. We track tips taken, and at the end of the month when they're divided up, we have our unfortunate answer. We confront the manager, who's also been tracking the tips with us, and unfortunately he becomes a wet flannel and does nothing about it. Solid as anything, but angry Hungarian waiter quits instantly. Storms out. I run down to check on him, as we've become good mates. He asks me straight, "So what about you? You quitting too?" Damn it, we get some Mandy, and damn this place. Alright, always been up for the crack. Always loved to give a big damn you to assholes. I go back in, scribble a quick resignation. Manager comes to speak to me and comments about how luckily he'd overbooked staff for the night. I turn around with scribbled resignation in hand, wild smile on my face. "Sorry, mate." His jaw has dropped so much it's falling out the door. I return hours later with said Hungarian friend, with my jaw now twitching like, damn. He has to forcibly remove my ass as I demand cocktails while he's closing down. Yeah, damn that chef. Owner and that manager too. Next story, he didn't quit, but it did cost my department. We worked in an office and it was generally quiet. Not too much noise. One of my colleagues, Mark, stormed out of the director's office and yelled he could get lost before slamming the door. Grabbed his things and left, slamming the glass door on the way out. I seriously was impressed the second door took it without breaking. Spent the next few years on workers' compensation and was put through the ringer through psych evaluations with panels, not just one psychologist. His claim for psychological injury was eventually upheld, so he got his job back. All of the leave that he had to taken before going on compo, and all of his leave he would have accrued if he hadn't been at work. When he came back to work, he requested he not be in the same office because one of the co-workers who contributed to his injury worked in that same office. Management could not find him another office in a completely different location fast enough. In terms of leave, I think it cost about $200,000 to compensate him by returning his leave and making it while. He left a few years later with a redundancy. That was about $500,000 at the time with leave balances paid out. So net to our department was only $300,000. But that blow-up certainly was memorable. Next story. It was my first job at McDonald's. I was 17 at the time. The manager of our McDonald's ordered my friend to smile. He refused, and she said, "Smile now, or you're fired." He looked at her with the most straight face I'd ever seen. He was then fired on the spot. A few months later, I forgot my hat in the back of my girlfriend's mom's car. I went into work, and the woman said, "Where's your hat?" I said it's in the back of my girlfriend's mom's car, who had driven to Alabama. She said, "Come back when you have it." So I came back a few days later, and I was fired. This woman was an insufferable idiot who made me clap my hands when customers entered McDonald's. When she wasn't there, things were easy and relaxed. Next story. This happened in 1981. I worked in a hotel and there was a wedding on. We started at 6 a.m. and were just leaving at 11 p.m. We had our coats on and were just heading for the door when the bride's mother recognized us. Excites me. "Can you get me a drink of water, please?" My mate who was with me said, "I'm sorry, but we have finished for the day." The woman was, "I asked you to get me a drink." My friend replied, "I'm sorry, but we are leaving, but I'm sure someone else will assist you," she said. I have never been so insulted in all my life, he replied. Well, madam, I suggest you get out more often. He didn't quit, he was fired. But I will always remember the woman's face as we turned and walked away. Next story. My former best friend got hired at a manufacturing facility, can't recall the name, along with about 20 other people. They had group orientation, and he said the boss/manager leading the orientation just oozed pompous jerk vibes, and the employees seemed like broken people, heads hung low. They finished the presentation, and the manager asked everyone to go around the room and tell the group why they chose to join the team. My friend's turn came, and he said, I applied here so I could use the company computers to access adult film, but according to the policies we just discussed, I can't do that. So, bye. Stood up and walked out. No one said a word. Next story. During my undergrad college years, I worked front desk at a Holiday Inn in a summer tourist resort town that had a huge festival every August that brought in close to 500,000 people. I was trained by and worked with a coworker with the same job as I, who had already been there several years. We got along great. Near the middle of my 4th year there, my coworker was promoted to front desk manager and auditor. I was happy for her and congratulated her, but it very quickly became apparent that the promotion went to her head, and she started power tripping all over the entire front desk staff. But she was the worst to me because she was either jealous or afraid I might get her position because I was the favorite of most of our business regulars, who constantly gave me their priority points. These points usually led to bonuses and/or promotions. So annual evaluation time rolls around shortly before the big festival. I walk in thinking I'm going to get a big raise based on the number of priority points I had received. Nope. GM and coworker/front desk manager are sitting there, and GM says he thinks I'm doing a great job and deserve a raise, but front desk manager says I'm slacking off and shouldn't get a raise at all. If that had been true, it would be one thing, but it simply wasn't true at all, and customer reviews of my work proved it. So GM says they're going to give me a 0.10 raise. I was pissed and told them that I was incredibly insulted and they could consider this my 2-week notice. I also told them I would stay and work those 2 incredibly busy weeks as long as I didn't have to work on the big culminating night of the festival, as I had worked it and Christmas Day for the past 3 years, and there was plenty of staff to cover it. They agreed to this stipulation, so I worked the whole next week, no problems. Then the schedule came out for the following week, and not only was I scheduled for the night I said I wouldn't work, but I was scheduled for a double on that day. I walked back to the GM's office and told him he better go cover the front desk because I was done, and I walked out. I went home, called all my friends to come over for a party, and I burned my uniform in the bonfire that night. Ah, good times. Next story. Once upon a time, I worked on a movie, kind of a student film. I was a student at the time. Much of the cast were students. Still, they had a budget and lots of professional staff. DP, production assistants, most of the grip crew, electricians, etc. The person directing was an Oscar-nominated actor who was the school's artist in residence. This actor, director, was keeping staff on set for abusive periods of time, 20+ hours on a few days. Near the end of one of these days, this guy was pacing the set, ranting and yelling, just being a damn tyrant. Here I was, not being paid at all, doing physically demanding work with all these other amazing people. I told the rest of the grips that I'd help them shut down for the night, but I wasn't coming back. I wake up 4 hours after call time to find my answering machine full. On the final message, this guy offers my wife and me an expensive steak dinner at one of the better restaurants in the area. I went back and continued to work. Most of the paid staff surrendered some of their checks to make sure I was paid. It's about 20 years later, and I'm still so grateful to the hardworking people I had the privilege of working beside. No day on the set went more than 10 hours after that, and the wrap party was pretty extravagant. Next story. Worked for a private health insurance. In retention, team lead was amazing. Colleagues were great. It was 100%. Managers were cunts. A lot of customers sucked big time. One call, I'd had enough of being abused by this old codger, and my brain simply went, nope, damn this. I interrupted him and said, I don't care. He asked me to repeat what I said, so I repeated, mate, I don't care. I'll transfer to someone who does, and transferred him before he could get a word in. Sent my TL a message to check my last call, had a quick chat and a laugh about it, and that was it. Working in a call center is not for everyone. I tried it twice. Returning my equipment was a nightmare. Took nearly 6 months because the courier would not come out to my address. Yet it was delivered just fine. So I packed it all up, drove 40 minutes to the nearest branch, which was packed with customers. I walked right up to the back desk that had someone on the phone behind it, loudly told them, "I've quit, here's your damn crap," dropped 2 heavy boxes with computer equipment on the ground, and left. Next story. Not quit, so much as fired. I worked night shift at a 7-Eleven for a while, as a floater. The floater is the guy that gets loaned out to other stores in the district when they have a hole in the schedule. Say, someone gets hurt, they get fired, they go on vacay, whatever. So I get a call from my manager. "Hey, I know it's your night off, but I really need you to pick up the night shift at..." I look at the clock. Night shift started 3 hours ago? Something happened? Yeah, get here as quick as you can. So I get to this store, in a kind of sketchy neighborhood, and the manager's in the place talking to another clerk, basically apologizing for what's going down. But by company policy, she has to let him go. Apparently some punk had tried to rob the place by sticking a knife over the counter to menace this clerk. And the clerk had simply grabbed the robber's head as he was leaning over and slammed it down into the counter. My first task in the store was cleaning the blood off the plexiglass countertop. Next story, I was working in disability support. First pay came in and the hourly rate was $6 less than we'd discussed in the interview. I spent a week and a half charging him trying to discuss it, but he just kept putting me off. Eventually I got him on the phone, and after 5 minutes of him trying to doing everything possible to avoid actually talking to me, I calmly told him, "You know what? You stick this damn job up your dishonest arse, you lazy damn prick." I can tell you it felt damn good. Next story. Working lifts at a ski area. Dude 1 relieves Dude 2 at the return terminal. Dude 2 begins the ride to the drive terminal for his shift there. Dude 1 waits until 2's at the tower, hits all the stop buttons, takes out the stop gate, throws it, and walks off, never to be seen or heard from again. Guests stuck on the lift got free hot chocolate once it got rolling again. Next story. This guy at my last call center job just walked out and then texted the boss like an hour later saying, "Sorry, I can't do this." Then they hired him back a couple months later, and then he just went on a vacation to Europe and stayed there. It was hilarious as a team member. As a team leader, I would have been furious. Next story. When I was a teenager, my first job I was hired onto was at a care facility for the elderly. I was hired to wait tables in their dining area. My first day I was shadowing a young woman around my age. She was extremely polite, patient, and seemed to genuinely care about the guests. She knew everyone's names, she knew what they liked to eat, and had a good rapport with all the guests. We went from table to table taking orders and making light conversations with the guests. She then escorted me to a separate dining area for guests that suffer from dementia and Alzheimer's. We were circling the room, and again, she was giving a great amount of attention to these guests and trying to get their orders. We finally get over to this elderly woman sitting on her hands, looking straight forward into the abyss, who was mumbling softly to herself. My trainer asked her what she would like to eat, but the guest continued to mumble. She moved in a little closer and asked again, but the guest was still in her trance. Finally, she moved in a bit closer, and the guest finally turned her head, smiled, and reached out to her, gently caressing her cheek. This probably would have been fine had her hand not been completely covered in crap. She swiped a fairly generous helping of peanut butter consistency feces across her face. My trainer immediately panicked. I was in shock, and I followed her, sprinting back to the kitchen. She went to the dishwashing station and was scrubbing her face with soap and scolding hot water as I just stood in disbelief. After vigorously scrubbing and cursing, she ran out the back door without speaking another word to me. She never returned again. I had to serve the guests myself the rest of the evening and felt traumatized by my first exposure of the working world. I ended up working there for like 2 years feces free, thankfully. Next story. For 10 years, my foreman berated me, made fun of my looks, religion, family, and anything in between. I was young and just getting married. I needed money, and I needed to make a name for myself, so I stuck it out. At 10 years, I finally had enough, and when he mouthed off to me, I told him, "Don't you ever talk down to me again, you scumbag." He got up in my face, and I gave him the devil's eyes with a smile. I was ready to spin that dude like a dreidel, but he went to his car and drove to our showroom, where the boss was. They both come back to have a talk with me, so we go in the hallway, and it becomes a gaslighting 101 course. I ripped the door to the hallway open and looked at my boss and said, "That's your future, good luck," and walked out. He followed me to my car calling my name, and I just kept saying, "That's your future, good luck." Mind you, this is after dozens of people quit due to this POS. I stuck it out for 10 years and was able to do the foreman's job better than the foreman. I went to my boss's competitor down the road, and in 3 years, I've doubled my income and now manage the things I was doing. Moral of the story? I wish I didn't wait 10 years to tell that guy to kick rocks. But my family is set up because of this move. Everything has a reason. Just keep living your destiny. Next story. Worked in an office for a freight broker firm. He was a new hire that was probably with us for about 2 months. Very quiet guy. On his last day, he lost one of his customers and had a complete breakdown. Threw his chair across the room and threw his PC monitor on the ground. 2 to 3 minutes later, sat back down on a different chair and pretend nothing happened. Manager came up to him to pull him in the office, and obviously fire him, I guess he saw it coming, and started yelling at the top of his lungs and laying on the floor until security escorted him out. Same company a month or so later, they fired this girl who just started cursing out her team lead for sabotaging her and was cursing at her team for not backing her up. Fun times. Next story. During a meeting about a new subcontractor that some of us were being moved to, he wrote his resignation on a napkin and gave it to our manager. It was hilarious. 3 guys quit that day. One dude was on Teams and just said, "That's not going to happen," and dropped from the call, emailed his resignation 5 minutes later. Next story. When I worked at a restaurant, this guy flipped off and swore at all the customers, and the store manager then did a happy dance and threw things on the ground. Wait. I guess that isn't that unusual. Next story. I didn't actually quit at that moment, so this may not count, but back in the 70s, I'm older than dirt, I found myself waiting tables in a pizza place. They hired a woman, let's call her B, as a waitress, and I was to train her. She was older than me, in her 40s, very poorly educated, had a child, husband left, and really needed the job. She wasn't smart, but was a good worker. One evening we were preparing. We were one of the closest restaurants to a major sports stadium, and would get absolutely slammed once the game ended. B came out of the back sobbing, telling me Jerry, the manager, had fired her because the till was short on her last shift. I had been checking the arithmetic on her bills, and knew there was no issue there, but I knew exactly what the issue was. Jerry's younger brother and his friends came in, hung around, and served themselves food and drink, including beer, which they were not old enough for. 3 times I had caught them up around the cash register with the drawer open. Figured it wasn't my problem. Jerry was supposed to be in charge of that, but all he did was sit in his office and watch TV. I told B to wait, not leave, and matched right back to Jerry's office. I told him what I had seen. "Yeah, well, maybe so, but I already fired her, so," was his reply. I took off my apron. "If that's your attitude, then you are working all the dining rooms yourself tonight. Good luck with the post-game rush." I quit. Jerry quickly rethought the situation and unfired B. I quit at the end of the summer anyway, had college and my hospital experience job. Next story. My wife got a new job paying significantly more plus benefits for a much less stressful position. The new place wanted her to start ASAP, but understood giving 2 weeks' notice was okay. She gave her notice, and her boss immediately went to her and tried to say that they require 3 weeks' notice, and if she couldn't do that, then they wouldn't give her any recommendations, and even threatened to dock her final check. The job required every one those under the boss to work many cases, and if they ran short on staff, it would cause serious issues which would get blamed on the boss. My wife calls the new employer and asks if she can start the next day, and they were ecstatic that she could. So my wife told her boss, "Well, it sounds like it doesn't make a difference if I leave in 2 weeks or earlier, so today will be my last day, and I don't want or need your recommendation." She said the woman stood there dumbfounded. My wife is extremely non-confrontational and was blathering about how unprofessional this was. The bonus was her start date qualified her for a raise within a month, which would have missed until the next year if she started 2 weeks later. Needless to say, her former coworkers informed her that the old boss had to take on all her duties and was in trouble with the higher-ups for the way she was running the place. Next story. I worked at Whataburger with my girlfriend. The manager used to verbally harass her and the other high school girls working there. After I told him he'd regret continuing to be a creep, he called me on Halloween, saying I no-called, no-showed for my shift, and I'd be written up. I explained I had the day off, and I was in the middle of getting my first tattoo. He said, "Oh, I know, I just penciled you in." Waited for a real busy night when both high school football teams/fans were there after a game. Took a big padlock and shut the main power off to the store and locked it. Watched from across the parking lot of the neighboring grocery store for about an hour as everyone left, and they finally figured out the reason, and then had to wait for someone to come cut the lock off. Never went back. Next story. Not exactly epic, and not really a quit, but my return to the office apparently stirred up a bunch of scuttlebutt. Had a job working for a married couple. She got pregnant and turned into a hyper idiot. He was an attorney but working in real estate to support her dream. They fired me because they assumed I was looking for another job, and I was because they were crazy. Decided I'd make him sweat and asked for a copy of my employment file. I knew he'd assume I was working on suing them. Could have if I even cared enough, but had another job in days and couldn't be bothered. Showed up in an Employee of the Month t-shirt. The company was small, and I'm pretty sure every person who had worked there in the prior year or two called or texted to congratulate me and let me know how paranoid it made them. Next story. Best story I got was working manufacturing for 8 years and going into machining. A year and a coworker said he wasn't making enough. Asked for a $2 raise. Plant manager kept telling him he was dispensable. No way he would give him a raise. Guy was there 7 years, topped out on pay. I was making the same, new to the trade 6 months in. The guy got mad, quit. I watched 3 seasoned employees and 2 newbies quit in the next 6 months trying to do his job. After the guy quit, all the work he used to do was backlogged, and the company couldn't subcontract because subcontractors wouldn't touch four-jaw work. Was the coolest thing I ever seen. A guy warning them for months just to give him the raise. Obviously, he had the last laugh, and it costed them way more than just giving the raise. Next story. A district manager brought an online meeting to a halt because she, as we found out, had bugged a store manager's office, and he was mumbling a tirade while she explained some extra work for her stores to do. She just shouted his name, and when he responded, she asked if he had anything to say. The two of them played it off cool, albeit awkwardly in the moment. Cut to a week later, this store manager was out sick, and in the middle of the weekly meeting, he emerges from behind her and starts beating her while her girls scream from downstairs. He turned off her cam mic, and none of us really know what happened because neither of them worked for the company again. Next story. My friend got sick of the poor food quality in the restaurant he worked at. He picked up a container of diced tomatoes on the line, looked at it, it was rotten. He threw it on the ground, splattering rotten tomato everywhere, said, "Damn this crap," and walked out. Next story. I was hired as server with over 5 years of experience at a chain restaurant called Hops back in the late 90s. I was told that if I came to work there, I was headhunted, I would have a guaranteed 4-table section and work every weekend for prime shifts. That never materialized, and in fact, was routinely placed in the 2-table section every Saturday for 2 months. After a couple weeks of this, he spoke to the jerk manager about this, and he assured me it was normal to make the new guy work smaller sections for a while. I told him that was not the agreement that you headhunted me with. He said he would remedy it the next schedule. Mind you, this place was full on having issues even producing food under a 30-minute ticket time. For the uninitiated, that is horrifically bad. But I waited. The next schedule was posted. I was relegated once again to a 2-table section. During the shift, while waiting on 4 people total, I walked right up to said jerk and called him out for lying. His response, "Well, I have a lot of senior staff here, and your attitude does not display good teamwork." So, I quietly turned around, told my customers I was transferring them to another server, and apologized. I ripped off my apron and gingerly draped it over his shoulder as he was talking to other customers and said, "Suck it. Find another stooge." Turned around and said, "To those of you I like, enjoy your life. The rest of you get lost yourselves. I'm out." And yes, this was after I had watched Half-Baked. Never felt better and got a job across the street. This manager came in several months later to try and lure me back. I simply laughed in his face. Next story. I've had way more than my fair share of crazy quits. It was something of specialty of mine in my early 20s. My personal favorite was at a restaurant with a weekly shift schedule. I let the manager know, 3 weeks in advance, that I would be unavailable on a particular day as I was going to a barbecue, as per the business holiday request process. He just said, A week later, I reminded him again that I would be out of town that day. This time he just nodded and walked away. Well, the schedule for that week finally get posted, and lo and behold, I'm scheduled for that Saturday, 2 p.m. to close, prime barbecue time. So I approached the guy with a, "Hey, I did already let you know that I'm not available on that day. I won't even be in town, so I'd recommend changing the schedule because again, I won't be here." He fires back with, "No, you will be here." Sorry, what? The schedule says you'll be here, so you'll be here. No, I won't. We've already had this conversation. I'm going to the barbecue regardless of what that piece of paper says, so for the sake of yourself, the restaurant, and the other staff, I'd highly recommend changing the schedule. No, you don't have a choice. Oh, damn, boy, here we go. Sorry, what was that? You don't have a choice. One more time, please. You don't have a choice. Cue the giant smile spreading across my face as I unclipped the ID card from my belt and held it at arm's length. There's always a choice. Next story. Worked at a big-name delivery company that was newish at the time and non-union. I had come from a sane union shop in a large city and never had insane bosses, as the union and upper management would weed out quickly. In this new place in a small town, there was this child of a manager who would scream at employees while the employees loaded or unloaded delivery trucks. Scream. X. "Hey boss, this one came in with ice on the doors. Going to need a few minutes to get open." Would be met with, "Get that open now! Right now move! Minutes are not being taken!" etc. In your face screaming. Dude was a HS football star who blew out a knee. He was big and insane. Loading a delivery truck uses load charts designed to mirror the route of the delivery. It is skilled work as the loader must learn the route. You can't hire off the streets and have a loader. You bring a newbie in, and they learn the charts and shadow. By the way, at Union Shop, learning was in a classroom where you were paid. This place made you take them home and learn on your time. Anyways, I digress. One Monday morning, I show up and punch in. We are missing 6 loaders. There is a box with an air label in front of manager's little closet office he was so proud of. Inside the box were 6 sets of uniforms, badges, and load charts. Next story. Years ago, I was a lead cook at a steakhouse. I had put my 2 weeks notice in and was finishing out my remaining time as normal. I got caught in traffic on my way to work on the 3rd day of my notice. When I arrived 20 minutes late, the GM approached me and gave me crap about not being serious about finishing up my time professionally. When I told him there was an accident and it held me up, he said, "Well, we could just make this your last day if that's how you want to do this." I remember telling him, "Fine." Took my keys off my key ring and tossed them in a pot of cooking soup. Said, "Damn you, fetch those keys and have fun at 6 when that bus shows up, and you don't have anyone who knows how to work the grill on a Friday night." He changed his tune because he forgot about the big party showing up, but I told him it was too late. He showed his true colors, and I'm done. Unplugged the boombox, wrapped the cord around it, and left. Next story. I was working a retail job for far too long after getting passed out over for various moves and promotions, even after already doing the work in some cases, and was really left feeling bitter about it when I was told that my performance has dwindled after I was getting burnt out. So when my grandmother, one of my favorite people in the world, suddenly passed away, and I had to help my mom clear out her apartment, they became really shitty about the fact that I was dedicating time to that and wouldn't let me go on stress leave for it. I had already been making moves to enter into the job field I'd gone to school for prior to my grandmother's passing, but I used all of my bereavement and all of my sick days in one go. And then, before I even came back from my bereavement leave, I was putting in my 2 weeks notice and offloaded all of my shifts to people, so I kind of just disappeared into the night. Next story. Back in the 80s, I worked at a liquor store. Cash, off the books. A little underpaid, but if I was making minimum wage on the books, it would have worked out to less. Over the course of a year, I went from stock boy to deliveries to cashier to manager of small beer/convenience store. The owner sold the place shortly before Christmas, and the new owners immediately had me back to stocking shelves and told me they needed my info to get me on the books the next day. Nah, I ghosted them. I bumped into former coworkers a few days later, and they told me the new owners were pissed, said they were going to make my life difficult when I came back. They really thought I was planning to come back after Christmas. Meanwhile, their holiday was a crap show. Customer volume the week leading up to Christmas was insane, and many were asking for the old owner and manager, asking what the hell happened. Next story. My husband was working at a place that had all kinds of crap going on, such as having all employees sign one guy's name on international shipping orders, or telling employees they own them the 8 hours a day at work, and employees need to just do whatever they are told to do. COVID hit, I have asthma and am high risk, and even though one of his coworkers, they worked in the same department, insisted she buy physically in the office every day, the company wanted everyone in 1 day a week. Husband stayed until the yearly bonus was paid. The next day, he went in, early before anyone else was there, left his work laptop, shoes, they made the office workers wear steel-toed shoes, so if they needed to walk into the warehouse they were covered, and his badge along with a note saying exactly why he was leaving. Next story. Many years ago, I worked at an insurance brokerage which had a separate accounting department. I'm guessing there were about 7 hard workers. They all hated their witchy, nasty, bossy older manager. On a payday, the 7 employees all went out to lunch together, and they never came back. They all banded together and found new jobs before they abandoned their desks, then mass. I remember going into that office that afternoon. The manager was flipping out because she was the only one left, and there were piles of work on their desks that needed to be done, so they had to hire temps. Management transferred the accounting manager out and created a job of her being the personal bookkeeper to one of the principals of the brokerage. I really admired and laughed that the employees quit so dramatically. Next story. I worked at a customer support site for cell phones, and one of the employees, a friend of mine, decided that this particular day was his last. He sent almost every call to testicle support for the first couple of hours. Then after hearing a banging noise, I looked over the divider and he was snorting something at his desk. He had, "Damn it, I'm out," on the back of his shirt and took off his jacket and walked up the center aisle as he left. Just before the grand exit, he typed into our little messenger app, "Damn balls." Funny that he's related to our current governor. Next story. Craziest way someone quit? Yeah, one definitely stands out. And every time I think about it, I wonder whether it was genius or madness or some obscure combination of both. It happened a few years ago when I was working at this mid-sized tech company in San Jose. We weren't huge, not the kind of place that shows up on TechCrunch, but we had a respectable client list and a rotating cast of productivity tools that changed every quarter. At various points, we used Basecamp, Notion, Monday, and something that might have been a customized version of Airtable. Nobody was ever quite sure. There was this guy named Kevin, or possibly Kyle. Honestly, he was one of those quiet coworkers who somehow knew everything but rarely said much. He handled documentation, system diagrams, internal tooling flowcharts, all the behind-the-scenes stuff. The kind of person who didn't make noise, but whose departure would be felt like a minor earthquake. So one morning, during our weekly all-hands Zoom meeting, he shares his screen without a word. No Slack message, no lead-in, just instantly takes over the presentation. It opens to a PowerPoint titled, "My 2 Weeks Notice, a Multimedia Experience," written in Comic Sans. That was the first clue that something unusual was about to happen. What followed was a full musical presentation, 10 slides, each one themed around a pop song, rewritten to reflect various workplace grievances. He had transformed "Since You've Been Gone" into a ballad about broken workflows, turned "Work" by Rihanna into a slow, mournful acoustic piece about sprint retrospectives. There were pie charts, animated transitions. He even brought in a voiceover track that he had clearly recorded the night before with surprising production quality. Midway through the presentation, somewhere around slide 5, he starts talking about what's next for him. Not in a grand way, just casually. Mentions he has a few friends who recently left to work at different places. One at Zapier, another at a new role with Miro. Someone else just joined Search Atlas, which he described simply as a surprisingly useful content thing without explaining further. Then he moved right on to a parody of Don't Stop Believing, focused entirely on the company's ticket prioritization system. At the end, he stopped screen sharing, thanked us for our time, and logged off. No dramatic exit, no farewell email, just silence. I heard later that he moved to the Pacific Northwest to open a small consulting firm that only works with nonprofits and builds internal documentation systems that are human first, whatever that means. Supposedly he only uses analog tools now and drinks tea he grows himself. But yeah, that was the most bizarre and oddly respectful quit I've ever witnessed. People still talk about it. Whenever someone leaves now, someone always jokes, So, are we doing the PowerPoint concert thing, or just a regular notice this time? Next story. Story my best friends. She was working at a shitty sporting apparel store in a dead mall for a summer job, right before her first year of university. She usually worked the women's apparel section, but at the end of the summer, they kept making her do cash. She is incredibly bad with numbers. They make no sense to her. She cannot even do basic math in her head, and as a result, she could never balance her till, and would frequently be there for an hour after close trying to figure it out. When she was hired, she told them this, and was explicit that she should not be on the till, but her manager was weirdly cruel and made her do it anyway, then would berate her about it in front of other employees and customers. During one lecture, about 2 weeks before she was set to quit, her manager said, "You're going to need to shape up if you want to keep your job here." My friend just said, "I do not want to keep this loser job. I quit." And she dropped her keys and vest on the floor in front of the manager and said, "Pick up this mess," then left. I was so shocked. She is usually so passive. I'm so proud of her to this day. Next story. 15 years ago, I was a student working part-time in a ceramic shop as a warehouse worker, preparing orders and loading trucks for customers. Physically demanding job. One day, the owner hired a new guy. The guy looked to mid to late 20s, very fat and sketchy looking. He spent a few hours working, and after a few hours, the owner went to him and told him he would have to let him go. I absolutely understood the owner. The guy was an absolute crap show, and he also seemed to be on substances. The owner left the warehouse to get back in the front, and the guy stood there for a few minutes until he then yelled, "F this place, I'll crap everywhere." An hour-ish later, the poor janitor comes in the warehouse yelling something along the lines, "This is disgusting," and then shows us some pictures of the bathroom. The guy literally browned the whole place. That is the day I lost faith in humanity. Next story. Got a job at a small startup law firm, is the only, quote, typist back in the day. This was 70s, maybe early 80s. I found out quickly that they paid me a salary, so I started at 9 to 5. Don't know what they did all day, but they would hand me piles of work at 3 or 4 in the afternoon that had all these footnotes. I was not going to get paid overtime. I took a bus home that only ran the last run. All the way out where I lived was 6 p.m. I couldn't get the work done by then, so I decided I had to leave. I knew they'd try to talk me out of it, so I wrote a resignation poem and called a clown delivery service. The clown showed up, read the poem, and gave them a dozen balloons to boot. And that's how I resigned. My friend called in the early afternoon and asked for me. There was this little chuckle from the other woman that worked in the office who said she no longer works here. Next story. My neighborhood had a little place that was reasonably priced, and the owner tended to hire older ladies. My demographic. Since I went in once or twice a week, we got acquainted and would chat as they prepared my order. One day, they were not their usual friendly selves, and it seems that the owner just got back from his expensive vacation in the sunny Caribbean. Mind you, the ladies had been working for him for several years, still making minimum wage. A couple of weeks later, they were really disgruntled because the owner cruised up in his new sports car, a truly overpriced status symbol. Next time I was in, the owner and his father were running the store alone and full of righteous indignation because people have no loyalty and nobody wants to work anymore. I laughed and quit trading there. Next story. My brother worked at a printed circuit board factory. He wrote, "Damn you, I quit," on a production piece right before lamination and walked off. For those who don't know, this will be caught after final inspection, but will be unfixable on this particular board. It will be visible under lamination and not for obvious reasons. Something they can send to a customer. Would have been epic, except that it happened to be a very expensive limited run board, and I was the one who got him hired based on my vouching for him 2 weeks prior to that. It's been 20 plus years, and I still would never recommend him to any employer of mine. Next story. I was a supervisor at a terrible machine shop. Even after a couple weeks, I questioned why I took the position. I worked there 8 or 9 weeks. I had room for about 20 or so direct reports, 12 on days and 8 on evenings. The evening shift stayed full, but keeping day full was a jerk. There were like 7 to 8 guys there, but I couldn't get those last 4 positions filled. Yeah, in 9 weeks. Had guys work a day or two and not come back after lunch on the first day, and even one left at first break went out for a smoke and never came back. Next story. About a decade ago at my first job, which was fast food, this guy was accused of stealing money from the safe, in which he did not know the combo, and the cameras even proved he did not steal money out of the safe. The management wanted him gone for some reason. He usually worked the morning shift, and after his shift was done, a manager said, "You can't go home. You close tonight." He specifically said, "All right, I can't do this anymore." Dropped everything. I mean, dropped everything he was holding and left. Next story. Me when I was in my early 20s. I was waiting tables at a small mom-and-pop diner. The wife was complaining that I needed to cut lemons in the middle of lunch rush. They were for the next day. We had plenty for that day. I handed her my order pad, this was before computers in restaurants, and said, "Cut your own damn lemons," and walked out the door. Next story. When my brother was in his early 20s, he was a joiner. Still is. He worked 2 weeks for a self-employed guy who refused to pay him. The wee man was a top amateur boxer, but gets underestimated at 5'3". Anyway, the wee man just knocked him out, breaking his nose and a couple ribs. Said the court fine was well worth the feeling of satisfaction. Next story. I worked at this cafe/restaurant in Melbourne called Tusk about 20 years ago. Melbourne in early summer is magical. This joint had probably 25 tables outside and 10 inside. One beautiful summer's day, all the floor staff call in sick, so it's me, one bartender, and the jerk owner, Francis. Francis was just waltzing around taking orders, but not running any food or drinks, not clearing any tables, and the most annoying was not setting any tables with cutlery. I was doing everything else, and literally running for this idiot. Every time I would get to a table, there would be no cutlery, and I would have to run back to the waiter's station to get it, slowing me down. I went over to Francis and asked him if he could please set the tables after he took any orders, which was the protocol I was trained that he wrote. About 10 seconds later, he comes up behind me and hisses, "Listen here, you little cunt. You don't tell me what to do, I tell you what to do." I didn't say anything. I just took a deep breath, walked out the back, took off my apron, grabbed my skateboard, and skated off into the sunset. He saw me skating off and he yelled after me, "A damn skater? I need a waiter, not a skater," which, I will admit, was pretty witty. Damn. Next story. I was denied my PTO for my wedding an entire year in advance. After I asked my manager about it, she started retaliating in the worst of compliant ways. Write-ups for things that have been perfectly fine the last 8 months. Having other employees report on me. Walked into the office on that one. Repeatedly denying my vacation, even when I talked to the store manager about all the other stuff, etc. I called the store manager in the office with another supervisor and laid it all out. I'm not the common denominator in a position that's been filled 8 times in 2 years, not including me. My direct report has been doing all these things in retaliation to me asking for time off that I already had the PTO for. My wedding. And the fact that I went above my supervisor to next up and ask for the time off, or I would quit. They said it wasn't up to them and to talk to my supervisor again. So I bought a Hallmark "I'm sorry for your loss" card on my first 15-minute break of the day I walked out. Had the conversation with the store manager, then signed it with my name and said, "It's me. I'm your loss. Please consider this my resignation." Effective immediately, I quit. I love that they have to keep that on file for 6 years before it can be shredded. Next story. I worked at a grocery store. The place was brand new, had just been built. The day I started, they moved me from doing checkout to customer service behind the counter. The manager was a real catty Karen and went on a power trip and reassigned me to stocking for part of my shift. One day I was stocking a shelf, and that same manager stood behind me watching. Didn't greet me at all. I greeted them and asked how they were. They didn't say a word to me and walked off. They clearly thought they put me in my place. There were a lot of other shitty things they did, like not replacing a vacuum cleaner with exposed wiring that would shock people as they used it. Typical shitty grocery store management crap. Eventually, before what's normally a really busy shift where I'd be working service, I just put my uniform and keys in a plastic bag on the desk with a note that said I quit with my name and date. Felt so good. I don't know that anyone saw me do it or realized. The owner even emailed me calling me childish. I don't know. I think it's pretty childish to feel like you need to have the last word, but I never responded. I just got a better job.